And so now we're going to start using this 4-box, and I use this extensively in the transformation video training series that I've done. And in the upper left corner, you have the individual, lower left corner, the team, upper right corner, product, program, process, line management, business ownership up in that right corner. Lower right corner is portfolio level upwards to the VPs and C-level and so on, directors and whatnot, and the board. And so it's really important to understand that all 4 boxes can have their own dialects of what they are speaking, which shows once again that on the left we have the language of management, and on the right we have the language of leadership. On the left, when you're talking the language of management for agile purists or agilists, typically at the individual level, they're talking about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. At the team level, they're talking about agile team facilitation, so that includes your Scrum Master for the most part, and maybe sometimes the product owner, and definitely the team is involved there. And that's primarily the language of management. We're going to show a slightly different picture here in a minute that builds on top of these thoughts. Over on the right-hand side, already at the product level on up, you're already starting to hear a change in the dialect. And so we'll talk about Agile Coaching, and the product owners, of course, work up in this box. And the program managers and the line managers, business owners, if you're using SAFe. All the scaled Agile methodologies live up here in the product box. Down in the left corner is where things like Scrum, Scrumban, Kanban, XP, things like that, they're all living down in the team and individual boxes. So when you consider where the Agilists work, and if you think back to that video with Jamie, this is what he was running into. He's used to speaking the language of management in the left 2 boxes, and he started working over in the right 2 boxes. And it was a new language for him, and it's a new environment for him. And it was like an alien language to him. And that's the dialect that the management consultants speak. The management consultants are sitting right down in the lower right corner, and they still work with the teams and the product owners and things like that. And so there's an overlap between what the Agilists are trying to achieve and what the management consultants are trying to achieve. And if you think about the Cynefin model or the Stacy diagram, the management consultants are trying to distill everything down to best practice, to the most simple way to get things done. The Agilists they're also trying to distill things, but they're experimenting and they're testing things very quickly. But they're not necessarily trying to get to best practice. They might be using good practice or emergent practice or even novel practice in order to get things done. And so that's sort of a major difference between the two. And so management consultants are speaking the language of leadership, and the Agilists are speaking the language of management. And typically, the two don't get along. And just like the example that I gave when I was out in Seattle on the West Coast meeting with that company, watching half the room of Agile purists and half the room of Agile consultants, I really thought that they were going to start to hit each other and get physically violent with each other. It was pretty amazing to watch. And so because of this, it gets extremely complicated. The communications get extremely complicated very quickly. And this is another slide that shows, first, you have to be able to wear both hats. You need to be able to wear the hat of an Agile coach, but if you're going to be an Agile coach or an enterprise Agile coach and work with the executives, you better be able to wear a management consulting hat as well. Otherwise, they're going to eat your lunch. It's that simple. So you need to know, which hat do you put on, when do you use it, when do you wear it, And I think this is a pretty good picture of when to use which hat. And again, it's a situation where you say, well, it's not, there's no clear delineation. And it's like, yeah, that's right, because I'm going to give you the standard management consultant answer. When do you use which hat? Well, it depends. And there's a lot of overlap between these two, and the overlap is growing. And where you have overlap of two different cultures, that is where a new culture will emerge, for good or for bad. And so I'm observing that in the long term, if you want to be successful at all levels in the organization as an agilist, you better be able to wear a management consulting hat and be able to speak the language of leadership. If you can't do that, then you should be like Jamie and just go back and work on the left two boxes, working with the teams and individuals, because you're never going to be comfortable working in the right two boxes where you have to deal with politics, and politics is a blood sport. If you don't like getting the crap beat out of you in that sense, in a political way, and if you don't want to play that game, if you don't want to learn how to play that game, or even how to speak the language of politics, and how to mitigate the politics and how to eliminate the politics, you're never going to be happy working over on the right hand boxes there. I hope that you get the idea there, because as you can hear, I'm getting a little bit passionate about this particular section. The second issue that we run into is dilution. Now, using the cascading vision setup where you've got executive, portfolio, program, project, team, and individual. Now, if each level you only lose 10% of the original message, it's sort of like the telephone game where one person whispers to the next person who whispers to the next person, and by the time you're to the end of 20 or 30 people, the message is completely changed and doesn't even resemble what you started with. Okay. Now, if you were able to only lose 10% per person, okay, just 10% per person, by the time a vision is communicated down through the organization, you've already lost 27% of the vision. It's already down to 73% at the program level. And by the time you're to the individual level, the loss is 47%. So you've lost almost half the message. And that's if you're really good and only lose 10% per level. This is why Dr. Cotter was emphatic about you have to over-communicate your vision for the change by at least 10 times, because he said it in reverse, that we under-communicate by a factor of 10. Well, that's another way of saying you need to over-communicate by 10 times. 10 times more than what you think. And if you over-communicate by 10 times more than you think, you can get that 53% there at the individual levels to start to move up towards the 70 to 80% level. But it takes consistent, repetitive, almost like drop by drop water torture of good news to get a vision to successfully cascade down through an organization. Because if you're just a normal organization, but you think you have really good communication, I'll guarantee you by the time that message is getting to the person, if it gets there at all, it's already you've already lost about half. And that's if you're only losing 10% per level. If you are losing 20% per level, already by the time you get to your program level, to your program managers, you've already lost half the vision. And worse, by the time you get to the individual, you've lost almost 75% of the vision. And if you're really bad at communicating and you're losing half at every level, well, at that point, you might as well try to find something else to do, because already just to the program level, you've lost almost 90% of the message. And by the time you get to the individual, the message is completely lost. And sadly, I think that this picture is probably closer to the truth than the other two pictures. Because if you were to ask your individuals to write down your vision, or the vision, even the vision for their team, word for word, I'll guarantee you that 98% of your people could not do that. And it would be an interesting exercise to test that and prove it. But based on my experience during the last 25, 30 years, this is pretty much what we're running into over and over. So these first two issues are negative issues. It's that, we're speaking different languages, which also contributes to the dilution because we think we're communicating down through. And then the dilution itself, as you're ending up with a picture like this, where it's gridlock and it's basically everyone sits there scratching their heads, wondering, how is it that we get anything done here? I'm sure none of you are experiencing that, right? I know that I've seen this over and over. This third issue isn't so much an issue, is that it's an issue because most organizations aren't willing, or maybe they're just unable, to do the work necessary to find their one thing. Okay? And so this is also sort of what I call a distillation issue. It's because you're distilling from those 25 initiatives to the 5 initiatives down to a single initiative for the next 12 months that if everybody does it, it will deliver to the organization exponential, remarkable, stunning results. And I think that is speaking the language of executives because those are the results that they want.